Genius hedge fund bets build empires. Blind spots destroy them. That's what everyone believes. But here's what nobody tells you. The people you call genius aren't doing anything extraordinary. They just evolve faster. But the moment you stop evolving, the market buries you. Michael Burry is the perfect example. He predicted the 2008 financial crisis, made the smartest trade of the century, and still, he lost the empire he built. Not because he was wrong, but because the game changed, and he didn't. Here's how Michael Burry built a hedge fund powerhouse and the decisions that quietly destroyed it. Michael Burry is the doctor-turned-investor who built Scion Capital from scratch and became a Wall Street anomaly. In 2000, he walked away from neurology, launched a fund with barely $1 million, and started compounding at a rate the market had no answer for. While the dot-com boom seduced the world, Burry refused to touch overpriced tech.
Has really created a very strong brand awareness with the consumer.
It was Wall Street's version of a telethon.
Hedge.com shot up today.
We're on track, it looks like, to hit 1 billion shares today.
Internet stocks drove a powerful surge on Wall Street today.
At the heart of it was the mad scramble by bankers and venture capitalists to take hundreds of unprofitable young internet companies public.
But I think the long-term opportunity really is to be the customer interface to your doorstep.
Some say the internet is so revolutionary that the usual rules for valuing a stock, such as revenue and earnings, no longer apply.
Then slowly, he beat the S&P and built a reputation for staying rational when everyone else chased hype. By 2005, Scion's cumulative gains crossed 240%, and in 2008, the number hit nearly 489% net. At a time when the broad market barely moved, a one-man fund outperformed entire institutions. But the real turning point came when Burry saw something hidden in mortgage data. Teaser rate loans, collapsing lending standards, and subprime bonds structured to fail. So what do you think he did with that data? Years before the world panicked, he bought credit default swaps. Then he effectively shorted the US housing market while everyone else celebrated record home prices. Investors revolted. Banks mocked him, and even his own clients begged him to stop. But in 2007, the cracks appeared. By 2008, the housing market imploded. Scion made about $725 million for investors, and Burry personally walked away with nearly $100 million. This moment changed the trajectory of his entire career.
We made $725 million, I think, on the funds in 2007, and in the first 6 months of 2008, there was about $730 million in withdrawals. Perhaps I had made the trade too big for the fund.
His insanity became foresight. His thesis became history. And Hollywood turned him into the face of The Big Short. But then at the peak of his success, he shut it all down. He closed Scion in 2008, not because he failed, but because the very people he saved nearly drove him out. Burry disappeared for years and came back in 2013 with Scion Asset Management. But this time, he returned to pure value investing. He placed big, concentrated bets on companies he believed were genuinely undervalued, staying miles away from tech hype and market euphoria. But the world had changed. Markets moved from fundamentals to momentum, from value to narrative, from cash flows to AI-driven speculation. And the very companies Burry distrusted, including high multiple tech stocks, index giants, and major AI names, became the engines of the entire market. He kept fighting the trend, but the market kept ignoring him. And by 2025, Burry shut down Scion again, writing to investors that his sense of value is not in sync with the markets. So was the world wrong, or did he finally fall behind it? Now here's the truth. Burry wasn't just a skilled investor, he was a force. He was the same man who once bent the investment world to his will. Yet despite all his talent, he eventually had to walk away. Not because he was wrong, but because the game no longer fit the framework that made him who he was. This shift reveals the core contradiction of his career. The same mindset that made him a legend eventually made him irrelevant. And that sets up the first lesson. Environment changes faster than your model. Look, the market doesn't reward consistency. They reward adaptation. That's why any business mindset that stays the same year after year eventually gets buried. Why? because the market evolves faster than you do. And that's the brutal truth of survival. Now look at Burry. His model worked in the early 2000s because fundamentals actually moved prices, and with that approach, he crushed the market for almost a decade. But when he tried his same business model in today's AI-driven bull era, it collapsed. Not because he became dumb, but because his framework stopped matching how the world really works. So here's the bitter truth. A model that doesn't update becomes a liability, and a strategy that refuses to evolve becomes a slow death. Now, write down lesson number 2. Winning a phase doesn't win the next one. Look, winning once doesn't make you unstoppable. It only makes you relevant for that moment. And this is exactly where most businesses get trapped. They assume success in one era guarantees survival in the next. And that's the biggest blunder. Because markets evolve, economies shift, opportunities mutate, and each new phase demands new strategies, new insights, or new timing. Now look at Burry. He dominated the early 2000s because the environment matched his strengths. Back then, cash flows mattered. Mispricing mattered, and his playbook worked in a market that rewarded discipline and punished hype. That's why he won, and he won big. But the next phase was nothing like the one he conquered. As markets shifted toward momentum, passive flows, and AI-driven narratives, the old rules stopped applying. Yet Burry kept playing the new game with the old framework. And that's where everything broke. That's why his big short win made him a legend in one era. But it gave him zero advantage in the next one. So the takeaway is simple. Every economic phase is its own battle. And no prior triumphs can guarantee protection from the next shift. Now come to lesson number 3. Knowing when to stop is a skill learned. One of the hardest parts of business isn't the competition. It's letting go of what you've already poured your time, money, and ego into. And this is where most people get trapped. They keep pushing long after their edge has disappeared. Not because it's smart, but because stopping feels like failure. But in reality, knowing when to stop is one of the rarest business skills on earth. And this is where Burry separated himself from everyone else. In 2008, at the peak of his fame, he shut down Scion. Why? Because the environment around him had turned toxic. So instead of clinging to a system that no longer served him, he walked away. And that was not the only time he made that move. He did it again in 2025. When his framework stopped syncing with the market, he didn't play emotionally. He liquidated the fund, returned the capital, and admitted that his model no longer matched the world he was operating in. And that kind of honesty is almost extinct in the business. Because here's the truth no one wants to admit. Stopping is not quitting. Stopping is strategic, as it protects the capital, the reputation, and the years of work you've already built. That's why sometimes the smartest move isn't pushing harder. It's stepping out before the market pushes you out. So here's the point. Success wasn't about Burry predicting the crash. It was about adapting faster than everyone else. And that's the part most people ignore. So before you close this video, ask yourself a simple question. What's one belief or strategy you've been holding on to for years? Is it still helping you, or is it just comfortable? Now, if it no longer gives you confidence, update it. And if it no longer makes sense, replace it or drop it entirely. Because always remember, if you don't evolve, the market evolves without you.